Xbox spent years buying studios: Bethesda, Activision, Ninja Theory, Compulsion. And of course, the message felt obvious: more exclusivity, more creativity, more reasons to finally challenge PlayStation and beat them at their own game. Xbox was no longer shrinking, it was expanding. And now, Tango Game Studios is gone, Compulsion rumors abound, and even Ninja Theory no longer seems as invincible as we thought it was. And the entire thing raises this weird, uncomfortable question: what exactly counts as success at Xbox? And you know, the more I thought about that question, the more that question sent me down a rabbit hole. Now, looking back, I think the moment where things felt off was with Tango Game Studios. Hi-Fi Rush was praised, critics loved it, and Xbox actually loved it too. In fact, they loved it so much that they immediately shut it down afterward. My immediate reaction was, okay, Xbox guy, if this doesn't count as success, then what does in your world? But the receipts kept piling up. Another Xbox layoff announcement, Compulsion rumors, and now even Ninja Theory. And the funny thing is, none of these stories are shocking by themselves. But it's when you put them together that they start telling a story. At first, I thought the story was simply about Xbox specifically. But the more I peered into the deep, I found that there was actually more to this than meets the eye. Because I kept seeing this pattern almost everywhere I looked. Xbox, Ubisoft, Warner Brothers, even Sony's live service push. Different companies, same pattern. And that's when I started asking myself a question that I simply couldn't stop thinking about. What kind of game does the modern gaming industry naturally reward? I mean, think about it. You play an amazing game, say God of War. You play it, you finish it, credits roll, and you move on. Now, compare that to something that keeps pulling players back each and every single week. Something built around engagement, recurring activity, retention. Which one do you think looks healthier on a spreadsheet? Now, I'm not making an argument for why we don't need narrative-driven games. And this isn't an attack on Xbox necessarily. The argument is much more simpler. Every system rewards something. And once you take a step back and you ask yourself, what does this system reward? Naturally, stop looking at companies and you'll simply start looking at incentives. And this is where everything kind of clicked for me, because the scary part isn't that Xbox might be making a mistake. The scary part is that everyone might be making the very same mistake. Like, when companies come under pressure, it's natural for them to look for certainty. And that can look like predictable engagement, predictable returns, predictable outcomes, which is reasonable until you start to realize what is actually getting squeezed out in the process. And that is experimentation, your creative risks, your weird ideas. That is what's being sacrificed on the altar of certainty. And through that alone, the story then stops being about Xbox and mostly starts being an indictment on the entire gaming industry. Now, a concept from Nassim Taleb that seems to fit like a glove, especially in this case, is that he argues that fragile systems slowly move towards optionality. In plain English, that simply means they stop taking weird bets and they start playing it safe. More efficient, more predictable. And that, ironically, is what actually makes them weaker over time. Because some of gaming's biggest successes started out as weird experiments. Your Minecraft, your Hi-Fi Rush. Nobody knew those games would become what they became, your Jake and Daxters. And that's the point. You see, most of these experiments would fail, but the few that actually make it change almost everything. So it naturally follows that the moment that a system becomes afraid of experimentation, it will naturally lose access to those breakthroughs. Now, to be fair, someone might say that studios need to be disciplined. They can't fund everything. And if that means that they need to shut down certain studios, cut off and cauterize certain infected limbs, per se, then that's a good thing. It shows discipline. And honestly, it's not completely unreasonable or wrong to say that. Companies don't have unlimited resources. But I think that something that must be pointed out is that there's a difference between discipline and predictability. Because discipline is meant to protect the stuff that actually works. Whereas predictability is basically out here teaching you that none of us are allowed to take any risks anymore. So maybe Xbox isn't necessarily the warning per se, but maybe it's simply the easiest place right now to see the warning. Because when you zoom out, you realize that this keeps on happening every single time. Same pattern, same pressure. EA is most infamous for following this exact same pattern. EA was notorious for buying studios and shutting them down afterward. And if we have enough companies simply optimizing for certainty, then there will never be experiments anymore. Nobody will surprise us. No one will take those weird creative risks anymore. And you know what the strange part will be? It won't be because the industry hates creativity. It will simply be because everyone is simply trying their very best to be safe. And if that is the economic incentive milieu that companies are operating under, then you can be very, very certain that failure is not necessarily the problem or the issue here. It'll be an industry that has taught itself slowly over time to fear experimentation in the first place.